4 unique individuals with unique abilities. A weather controller, an illusionist, a knight, and a power copier unite to protect the Jewel of the South, Atlanta, Georgia. This is Guardians of Atlanta. These audio adventures are supported by listeners like you. Without your help, these stories can't be produced. If these stories feed your imagination, please consider helping me feed my family by visiting joshuadavidling.com/support and becoming a monthly contributor. And now, Guardians of Atlanta, Episode 1, The Long Summer. 1. The Prophecy. Reed Jones was a farmer, just north of Atlanta. His wife laid sick in bed. Just picture it, can't you? A baby in her womb, a storm raging outside. The lightning locked them in. The storm poured from the skies. The wind and rain battered their tiny Georgia town. The hails and gales tore power lines down. The back window had been knocked out by flying debris, and there was no help that either of them could see. Emily, Reed's wife, her complexion was shoddy. Nausea, pain, and cold racked all of her body. She moaned and cried and prayed that it was just the flu, but Reed Jones had no clue what to do. He set a candle on the nightstand and tucked in his ailing wife and slammed his knees down to the floor to beg God for her life. "Please, Lord, please, God, save my wife and child." The wind started blowing, and there came something wild. The wind had calmed, the rain had stopped, but what came was a storm indeed. Light crinkled at the edges of the walls, golden as ripening wheat. And fading in as the room became light was a figure about 8 feet tall. His stature not only dwarfed the Joneses, but seemed to stretch their walls. He wore a tan leather duster with black pants, shirt, and boots beneath. The duster looked dirty and worn, and tassels hung from the sleeves. On top of his head was a black cowboy hat, obscuring his eyes and nose. A smirk on his lips, surrounded by a goatee, stood frozen in a wry pose. Before the figure opened that mouth, Reed Jones stared blankly and knew he was in the presence of an angel, and there was nothing he could do. The voice was richer than honey and brighter than those flecks of gold light, deeper than the deepest part of the Chattahoochee, and it spoke a prophecy that night. "Reed Jones, good and faithful servant, your wife will be saved from death's dark current. Your daughter is well, but she'll be born with power. All weather before her eyes will cower. And with God's help, she will withstand great adversity. She will lose everything, but she will learn this homily. If Christ is with us, who can be against us? Your daughter, Reed Jones, will stand for justice." And just like that, the angel was gone before Reed could say a word. He jumped back up to his precious wife. By love and worry he was spurred. But his wife lay there asleep and warm, her color now a rosy red, and her breathing was as calm and relaxed as the baby that laid within her in that bed. Reed Jones cried with utter relief as the sky above turned red too, praising God Almighty in heaven, for there was nothing he could do. A few weeks after that, Emily birthed from brittle bones a daughter with brown hair, and they named her Cyrus Jones. 2. The Headband. 5 years later in Alpharetta, the Joneses' home in town, at Canaan Baptist Church, Sunday school had come in from the playground. It was time for the parents to come and pick up all of their young kids. Reed rolled in to pick up Cyrus and was met with a hug and a kiss. But then her spastic little girl demeanor turned sour in a flash. Her chin jutted out in a frown and into a complaint. She did splash. "Can you believe it, Daddy?" 5-year-old Cyrus whined. "They said our angel's not in the Bible, but I told them you saw him shine." Reed sighed and thought about how to explain why they couldn't just go spreading that tale. But any way he thought to explain it turned out to be a big fat fail. "And Ezekiel's even a book in the Bible." "Yes, but that one was a prophet. And I told you the angel didn't tell me his name. Cyrus, you should probably drop it. Just because we call him that, because I have a feeling that's his name, doesn't mean you should go telling everyone about it. They'll think it's just a game. Just because I know what I saw doesn't mean it makes sense. And it doesn't matter if other people believe it. You don't have to be so intense." Cyrus's tiny mind was going a mile a minute. She suddenly reached up and touched her hair and felt no headband in it. Little Cyrus, full of fright, screamed and cried and moaned. "Daddy, it's my favorite headband. We just can't go home." "Cyrus, you've lost these things before. They always turn up again." Just then a little head peeked round the Sunday school doorway's bend. The little boy hunched his back, and his mom behind him said, "I think Connor has something for you, Cyrus, and he won't ever take it again." The little boy inched his way toward the prissy girl. He held out the missing headband. Cyrus took it and twirled. "Yee-haw!" she exclaimed as she spun around. "But why'd you take it, Connor? Tell me now." "You were playing with all the kids, and I just felt left out. I was too scared to talk to you, so I took your headband out." "All you had to do was ask if I would be your friend." Connor asked that very day, and their friendship had no end. 3. The baseball game. The old blue-black door swung open into the Joneses' farmhouse. Cyrus looked into the kitchen. There was no one about. Lightning flashed and thunder roared, and her soaked and shivering form stepped inside and dripped to the floor, hoping to get warm. "Cyrus?" came a voice from the other room. "Is that you, darling?" he said. A dirty-looking man walked in from the kitchen with a Braves cap on his head. He wore a red flannel shirt with blue overalls on top, and the car part he'd been carrying he quickly did drop, for the sight of his daughter crying was alarming indeed. He hugged his crying teenage girl as they slipped down to their knees. "Cyrus, what's the matter? I thought you were at Connor's game." At the game's mention, the weather grew less tame. As Cyrus coughed and spluttered, the rain grew more intense. Reed took her aside into the living room and quietly let her vent. Once she had released the bulk of her inner turmoil, she looked up at her dad, and anger at herself roiled. "Dad, I ruined the game. I was sitting in the dugout next to Connor like Coach McFarland lets me, and I tried." She began to pout. "It was stupid, but I tried to hold his hand, and as soon as I did, he had to go get ready to bat, and—" Cyrus closed her eyelids. "I couldn't help it. I started crying." Cyrus lost it again. Reed stroked his daughter's hair. "They lost the game when it was called due to weather. They were in the ninth down by 4, and they had the bases loaded and Connor on deck." Now Reed saw what she was crying for. "And the rain was your fault, Cyrus?" "Are you kidding? Of course it was." Reed took a moment to process it all, and they relaxed during that pause. "I'm sorry, Cyrus, but you can't let this keep you from living your life. I've told you before, and I'll tell you again, you don't have to keep secrets and lie. You can tell Connor about your gift if you want." "There's no way he believed me, Daddy." That was always her response. "Why did God give me this gift? Why did he send that stupid angel to you?" Reed saw the pain in his daughter's face, and even then he knew. He had to balance his firmness and comfort in his reply. "God made you the way he made you. He gave you control over the sky. And it won't do nothing but hurt you to be cursing his messenger on high.
I know things are hard for you. Harder than most girls, in fact. But it will get better, Cyrus. God's angel promised us that.
Cyrus sighed and curled up into her daddy's arms, and the raindrops lightened into a sprinkle as they stayed safe and warm inside their beautiful farmhouse, and there was no more need for talk, just the tapping of the rain and the ticking of the clock. 4. Telling Connor. The boat shifted, creaked, and bobbed in the wind on Lake Lanier, but Connor and Cyrus both enjoyed it. They didn't have any fear. Connor loved to sit and fish, and Cyrus loved the spray, and they loved to be with one another on any given day. The baseball game was 2 years ago. Cyrus was now 15. She felt much more confident in herself, and she was bursting at the seams to tell Connor her one secret. Her best friend had to know, and she figured now was the best time as any. She took deep breaths as they rowed. The spot they settled on the lake was hidden among the trees, a great spot for catching catfish, but they were tossed about by the breeze. It wasn't a very great day to fish, but they enjoyed it anyway. The overcast sky and high winds made their canoe rock and sway.
Connor,
Cyrus began to speak.
I have something to tell you.
Fish ain't biting anyway. Go ahead, Si, what's new?
It's a story about when I was born that only me and my parents know. But it's time that I told my best friend about Zeke's visit years ago.
Zeke? Connor asked with a laugh. That boy on the wrestling team?
No, stupid, not him, my guardian angel, she screamed.
What? Connor said with amazement, then turned his full attention to her.
My parents were both in the farmhouse, and Mama was sick and sore. Daddy prayed and asked God to save her, and to have mercy and save me. Then an angel appeared to my dad, and the angel told him about me. He said I would control the weather as far as my eye can see, and that I would know love and loss, but through it I would see.
Whoa, that's a good one, Cyrus. Your stories have been getting good.
It's not a story, it really happened.
Cyrus's anger soared.
When I control the weather, it's like my body quakes. I feel a release and then let the rain go, and then I feel...
Tap the brakes. Cyrus, I really want to believe you, but I just heard you say this. Your guardian angel made you make it rain, and somehow it feels like bliss. It sounds like you're just using the bathroom.
The feeling is very close.
Connor couldn't help but laugh, and Cyrus said,
This ain't a joke.
Suddenly a lightning bolt shattered the clouds and struck a tree on the bank. Connor stared at the burning tree and his mind went completely blank.
Now do you believe me, Connor?
Yes, Cyrus, I do. And that is the tale of how Cyrus Jones told Connor Murdoch of her powers in that canoe. He had many questions still to ask, but Cyrus was elated to find it didn't change their relationship one bit, or the path of Connor's mind. If anything, they grew closer, once Cyrus took the step to lay her soul before her soulmate and trust God for the rest. 5. Home is where the heart remains. Fast forward on through time to several years later. Cyrus was in college at UGA and celebration was in the air. The night before the last day of school, Cyrus had a party invite. She would meet her friend Cindy at a club called Top Dog and they would party into the night. Cyrus didn't do clubs very often, but Cindy had been close to her, at least in recent weeks, but she still wasn't sure. Regardless, she got dressed to the nines and put on her best leather boots, and as she walked into that club called Top Dog, she felt her senses uproot. The music was so very loud, her heart muscles struggled to beat. She couldn't see Cindy anywhere, the darkness was so complete. Then, as her ears adjusted to the sounds, she heard a million cuss words. She quickly decided that this place was simply for the birds. A drunken man grabbed her by the arm and said to her, "Let's dance." Cyrus angrily wrenched her arm away and the man fell in a drunken trance. She left Top Dog as quickly as she came, and a tear rolled down her cheek. The feeling that she had of being misplaced had finally reached its peak. The hope of summer hovered over her, and the thought of returning home, to a place where she was understood, where she'd never be alone. Fast forward, about 12 hours later, Cyrus was in class, zoning out with a blank stare. Summer break, just a few minutes away. She stared at that clock for what seemed like days. And even in that crazy little town of Athens, the pressure was too much on a girl who raised chickens, horses, cows, and crops. That bell rang, and there were no more stops. The quicker she get there, the quicker she be back among the pine creeks and peach trees. No matter what happened, no matter what changed, one thing never did, 'cause home is where the heart remains. And as she went home, she saw her whole world to change, and every time she stepped out, new construction was ablaze, and it was amazing. All the shops and malls and offices and streets. Man, they got gall, Cyrus thought every time her mind would drift, when the winds of progress would shift. They'd leave a bigger mess than ever before. The South been dying slowly since the Civil War. The quicker she get there, the quicker she be back among the pine creeks and peach trees. No matter what happened, no matter what changed, one thing never did, 'cause home is where the heart remains. And even though the borders of the Joneses' home were surrounded by the aforementioned stores and chrome, their 20 acres of land were glorious. Cyrus ran inside, feeling victorious. The minute she opened the door to her home, she knew that she was no longer alone. All of everything she'd been feeling melted away. In the arms of her parents, tonight, she'd stay. And country roads take her home to a place where she belongs, Alpharetta, and that's her hometown. Take her home, country roads. 6. Progress is knocking. Dinner time came for the Happy Jones family. They sat down to enjoy their meal, but something cold still lingered in the air, and all three of them could feel the relentless spirit now climbing their steps, a monotonous drone in his heart. And soon that drone would collide with their happiness, and trouble truly start. Progress moves, can't be stopped. Trees cut down, and then they're chopped. Progress will never be dropped till this whole culture is swapped. During dinner time with the Jones, a knock came to the door and everyone froze. Father Reed went to the door to open. On the other side was a man who was hoping to take their farm, take their land, and turn it into a strip mall. He reached out to shake Reed's hand, but he wasn't getting no howdy, y'all. In fact, he wasn't even getting a no sir. But against this man, nothing would deter.
My name is Philip Keller. Don't worry, Phil, I know you. You've been sending your vultures off and on since 2002.
Well, you'll be happy to know the offer tripled in price.
It doesn't matter. Now get off our porch.
Gee, aren't you nice?
I'm telling you, you're sitting on a gold mine. This land is a big budget deal. Didn't you hear me? I said get gone. You should know the drill.
Reed closed the door sharply, and Philip Keller smiled, his plans for their land going longer than miles. He took one more glance at their yard and said, "Looks like Mr. Nice Guy is finally dead." Reed Jones had said no. There was nothing he could do. He slammed the door on his Corvette and stewed. But still Philip plotted. But still Philip planned to one day put an end to this southern strand. He then drove off, but inside Reed was asked by his wife Emily.
"Who was it that passed by our door during dinner?"
she happily chimed.
"Philip Keller himself. Guess what he wanted this time." "Is he still coming around?"
Cyrus asked in dismay.
"Him and his cronies come by every day. At least that's how it feels most of the time. That's enough about that then. Would y'all like some wine?
And as the Joneses enjoyed their dinner and Philip Keller drove away, the drone in Philip Keller's heart droned louder with wild decay. Progress moves can't be stopped. Trees cut down and then they're chopped. Progress will never be dropped till this whole culture is swapped. 7. Small Town Romance. As Philip Keller's Corvette headed back to 400, and the Joneses began dinner and sat there and wondered why Philip Keller wanted their land so badly, a different sports car pulled up, and Cyrus squealed gladly. The black Trans Am with so much love and work put inside it ferried her favorite person in the world. Oh man, was she excited.
I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I forgot. Connor wants to take me out.
No problem, sweetie. See you soon.
Thanks,
Cyrus said with a shout. She ran out, without a single doubt. This is what love songs are really singing about. There's never any hate and never any doubt. This is the person that you're meant for. It's not by chance. It's nothing but a small town romance. Years ago, when Cyrus was young, a boy came to her Sunday school class. He stole her headband to get her attention. He said sorry, and they became friends fast. Love stories like this only come in small towns, where people don't leave each other. They stick around. And even one day their parents knew they'd find both of them married. They were that entwined. This is what love songs really mean at the heart. It begins the second you meet, right from the very start. You're best friends forever, even at first glance. It's nothing but a small town romance. So that night, when Connor came in his Trans Am, he picked up Cyrus and drove somewhere grand. He planned on taking her to Stone Mountain, but a gas leak kept all of that from happening. So instead, he drove to a much smaller place, a little neighborhood that survived by God's grace, a cul-de-sac on top of a large mound, and you could see all of Atlanta from on top looking down. They had a picnic right there with fried chicken and sweet tea, but then all of a sudden Connor said, "Cyrus, will you marry me?" Even down the road, when you're talking about forever, you really can't remember a time you were never together. So it's really not that hard to maintain that stance. It's nothing but a small town romance. 8. Electric Shock. When they arrived back, the stars shine brightly, unconcealed. They stared through the black at something gleaming in the nearby field. Cyrus went to check it out, but it floated up off the ground. Connor gave a shout, and Cyrus ran at the sound. The chase began. They ran and ran, but Cyrus fell and gave a yell. Connor turned back and jumped in the way, but that shiny machine took his life away. With one electric shock, his heart began to slow to a stop. Cyrus held him for a few, and he told her, "I love you." Connor slipped away, and a storm came that day. But from Cyrus' eyes alone came the thunder's loud groans, and the raindrops wailed and bemoaned Cyrus Jones, who was all alone. This may seem quick, but I tell it that way to make you feel what Cyrus felt that day. The adversity that the angel had promised of her was beginning, all in a blur. And that's how life tends to go. It doesn't dawdle. It's not slow. Make sure you're ready like Connor was. That's the end of this poem. And now we pause. Thanks for listening to episode 1 of Guardians of Atlanta, The Long Summer. Episode 2 will be The White Knight. Once again, if your imagination was fed by this story, I pray that you'll consider becoming a monthly supporter at joshuadavidling.com/support. Until next time, keep adventuring.